Hi, in this lecture we are going to discuss the basic interface of the software Final Cut Pro. To run Final Cut Pro, you need a Macintosh machine. Since Final Cut Pro, as we discussed in the earlier lecture, that it was developed by Apple, you only need an Apple computer to run Final Cut Pro. Let's run the software. This is what the software looks like when I first open the software. I have a place called a browser. This place is called the source monitor. This is called the record monitor, and this is the timeline where I will edit my film. Before I get into the interface, I like to explain what is the folder structure on which FCP works. Let's go to the hard drive. Under this hard drive, I want everything to come under the folder called Learning FCP. Here, see, the folder is empty. But now I am going to assign this folder to FCP. If I go to the software, I first start setting my system settings. I click on Final Cut Pro and I click on System Settings. Under System Settings, there are a few folders which you need to assign. The first one is called the Video Capture, Video Render and Audio Render folder, which I'm going to set on the folder that I mentioned, which is Learning FCP. I select this folder and I choose. By doing this, I'm making sure that all my dumped material, the materials that I'm going to use, the files that are going to be rendered, the audio files that are going to be rendered, everything is going to be there within that folder. If I need to take this project to some other place, I can just take this folder to the other computer. Other things here are, one is the Waveform cache, which I again set to Learning FCP, Thumbnail cache, which I set to Learning FCP, and the Autosave Vault. The Autosave Vault is a folder that stores the project files after a particular period of time. It depends on the settings. I can make it 10 minutes. I can also make it 5 minutes. Or if I think I don't need to save the project file so often, I can even make it 30 minutes. I click on OK and this project is now ready. The first thing that I need to do is to save the project file. To save the project file, I need to do something in the project so that I can save the file. I just get a black video onto the timeline. Then I click on File and Save Project. I want to name this project as Learning FCP. And I want to keep this project file under the same folder. Now let's go back to the hard disk. This folder was empty when I last showed you, but now this folder has got a few more folders. One is obviously the project file that I just saved. The other ones are called the audio render files. Any render file that is going to come from the audio track is going to be stored on this folder. Capture Scratch is a folder that keeps all my video files that I'm going to dump from my DV tape or from any other VTR or from any other sources. Render files keep the files, the video files which are rendered on the timeline. That is, since I'm following non-destructive method, the files that I'm going to manipulate, change, add transition, effects or anything on the timeline, these files are going to be rendered and these will be stored within this folder. Let's go back to the software. Now this area is called the browser. This is where I import my files, and when I successfully capture files from the DV tapes, these will come on this browser window. Now let's import some video files which I already have within the hard drive. Let's take a few files here. These are all video files. It automatically comes here. Now this browser also can give me details, showing me the details of the files that I have imported. This is the duration column. The duration column gives me the time of the clip. Say for example, this particular clip is only 17 seconds and 16 frames long. This is the TC count. We'll talk about time codes in our later lectures. This is the frame size. This is giving me 1920 by 1080. 1920 by 1080 is HD resolution. In the first lecture, we have discussed about HD resolution and standard definition resolution, which is 720 by 576. In the next column, we can see the frame rate. This is showing 25 FPS. 25 FPS means that this is essentially on the PAL platform. That is, I'll have 25 frames per second. This is the compressor settings or the codec. Before getting into the other parts of the interface of the software, I want to explain certain things regarding the codecs. Here I have imported a few files which are showing me Apple ProRes. It often happens that straight from the DSLR or from chip-based recorders, you take the MOV files straight to your computer. Let's see, in this case I import files which are coming straight from the DSLRs. See here I have the same files which is native in nature. I choose these files and here you will see it's showing me H.264. H.264 is not an editable codec. H.264 is called a distribution codec, where I do not store information for each and every frame. This becomes a problem when I start editing with these files. Your computer will get slow and after a point of time you won't be able to work on the video files. It's always better that you transcode these files onto some editable codec. Apple ProRes is an example of an editable codec. In the later lectures, we'll show you how to log and transfer H.264 onto Apple ProRes formats. The browser also gives us other information regarding if it has audio tracks or not. If it has got audio tracks, how many tracks of audio do we have here? Next is the source monitor. The source monitor shows me what I have on the rushes. Let me click a particular shot. This is my raw footage. On the source monitor, I can drag the playhead anywhere I want and I can randomly access the rushes on the source monitor. On the top of this, you will get a few more buttons. This is the zoom button, that is, if I want a 400% zoom of the image or if I want to fit the image onto the window that I have got. Okay. If you want to get into the details, see I'm working here on a smaller space. If I want to see what actually I have, I can opt to zoom into the image and I get into the details if I want to look into what I actually have here. On the right hand side, we have an option where we have settings like image and wireframe and only wireframe. When it's set to image, I only get to see the image and nothing else. If I click on image plus wireframe, I get a wireframe. With the wireframe, I can move the clip here and there if I want to. But we will explain this later when we will talk about keyframing and effects. Apart from this is an overlay option. This is very useful when you are working on a project. Say for example, the title save option. Let me switch off the wireframe. Yeah, this is the title save option. This is a marker on the image which tells me that the safe area of the image is limited to this area only. This is the title safe option, which means that if I am placing titles, say for example the name cards, the subtitles, everything should be within this box. This is the safe area. On any television set, this will be within the image area. This outer square is called the action safe marker, which means that this will be visible on a television set, but this will be at the edges. So be careful. If you want anything interesting or if you want anything important to be seen on the image, make sure that it's within the given box. Outside the box, this is the area which I'm not going to see on a normal television set. Make sure that your entire image is within the given area. Now we move on to the record monitor. The record monitor is the screen that gives me what I have on the timeline. The timeline is the place where I have all my clips placed one after the other so that it looks like a complete film. Now, say for example, I have a shot here on the timeline. I can see this image on the record monitor, which means that I have this on the timeline. Now if I play back the timeline, this will play back the clip for me on the record monitor. So this window is meant for viewing my rushes, and this window is meant for viewing my edited sequence. You have the same set of buttons also on the record monitor. That is, you have the zoom option and you have the wireframe option. Now on the timeline, I have various buttons. Here on the left hand side is called the video button or the video layer. I can have multiple video layers if I want to. For adding video layers, I just right click and I click on add track. If I do so, it will add a video layer for me. And on the audio track, I can similarly add audio tracks if I want multiple tracks to be there. Please remember that if you have something on video track 1 and if you add something on video track 2, and when you play it back, at this particular point, you will be able to watch only video layer 2. So anything and everything that is below a layer, only the topmost layer is visible. Now let's go to the tool palette. This is the tool palette. I'm going to explain to you the basic tool palettes that I need for editing. First is the arrow tool. Arrow tool is my neutral tool. That is, in any mode, I always choose the arrow and I can do selection and enabling the monitors and selecting clips and so on. This is a special arrow tool called the Select Track Forward tool. When I click on this, I get a right-sided arrow. If it's a single arrow and I click here, this will select the video track on to the right of this arrow. If I select this on V1, this will select everything to the right of this arrow. If I do the same thing with the audio track, it will select the audio track to the right. Similarly, I have other options here. I have the left arrow option. This will select everything to the left of this arrow, and if I am working on the audio track, this will select everything on the left of this arrow. If I am trying to select something in between, it will obviously select the entire track, either video or audio. I also have a double arrow tool. The double arrow tool selects everything to the right side. So if I click on this particular clip, it will select everything because I am at the middle of this clip and all the clips here are placed to the right of this particular arrow. Now if I take the left arrow, this will select only this clip because this clip is placed right of the left arrow tool. But if I click it here, it will select everything to the left. So this is basically a selection tool. Next is the razor tool. The razor tool is a tool used for cutting the shot on the timeline. Say I want a cut here on the playhead. So I just select the razor tool and click here. This cuts the shot in two parts. Remember, I am following the non-destructive method of editing. So something that I'm doing on the timeline is definitely not affecting my source files. My source files are intact and they're placed as it is on the hard drive. The same happens with audio. I want to cut here, I can do it with the razor tool. But if you look carefully, I'm only cutting one layer of audio and video. But if I take the multiple razor tool and if I take it here and if I click it here, it will cut all the layers that is falling vertical to that position. If I click here, it will cut all the video layers and the audio layers. Now if I take the arrow tool, I can select and make this separate. Next is the zoom tool, which is here. With the zoom tool, if I click, I can zoom in. That is, I'm going to the details of this timeline, and I can also zoom out. On this particular palette, I also have a hand tool. A hand tool is basically used for taking the timeline to the left or to the right. One very important tool is the pen tool, which is the last tool on the tool palette. This is called the pen tool. A pen tool is used to manipulate the keyframes on the timeline. What are keyframes? You have on the left hand side corner a keyframe active button. That is, as soon as I click on this, it will give you a rubber band. This black line that you see on top of this clip is called a rubber band. This is basically the opacity handle. Opacity handles are meant for reducing or increasing the opacity of the particular clip. Now if I add keyframes here and I drag this down, this will give me the effect of a fade out. This is done with a pen tool. With this pen tool, we can also manipulate the audio levels. So if I add keyframes here and add keyframes here, I can drag the key points down and this will give me the effect of a fade out. We will explain pen tool, the functions of pen tool in our later lectures. Now, if you remember, on the system settings, we missed out two folders. One was the waveform cache and one was the thumbnail cache. Let's explain the waveform cache. We can see audio tracks here on the timeline. Now, if I select the show audio waveform option, I will see audio waveforms here. This means that I have loud sound here and I do not have such loud sounds on this particular part of the track. But remember that these are all created images. Waveform, the thing that I see here on the timeline, are images that are created by the software. And since they are created, it needs to be stored somewhere. Waveform cache is a folder that stores all these images of audio waveforms. Similarly, if you see here, at the beginning of every clip, I have a freeze frame of the clip, the starting frame of the clip. Every time I cut it, I will get a new frame, which makes it easier for me to understand that this is the beginning frame of this particular shot. These are the images that are created by FCP and are stored in the folder called thumbnail cache. So the more number of shots that you have on the timeline, the thumbnail cache folder will be heavier in size. So if you want, at any point of time, if you want to free space from your FCP project, You can delete the thumbnail cache and the waveform cache folder anytime you want. FCP will recreate these files all over again. This will give you some space to work on. This is all for this part of the lecture. In the next lecture, we'll start with log and capture. With the log and capture, we can get materials from the DV tapes straight onto the hard drive, and we can start our edit.